Coming up on episode 37 of Omnivore, the future of disruptive innovation in food, harvesting the ingredient potential of kelp, and a crash course in traditional fermentation. This is Omnivore, from the editors of Food Technology Magazine and the Institute of Food Technologists.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by Almond Board of California. Almonds offer endless possibilities for innovation. Visit almonds.com/trends to learn more.
Welcome to Omnivore from IFT and Food Technology, where we explore the intersection of business, science, and technology in the global food system. I'm Bill McDowell. Given the recent string of supply chain interruptions, inflationary pressures, and new product launches that didn't always pan out for investors, it's no wonder some larger manufacturers have opted to refocus on their core product offerings. But that doesn't mean that disruptive product innovation is dead. As Food Technology Magazine's Deputy Managing Editor Kelly Hensel recently discussed with Jeff Grogg, Managing Director of JPG Resources, a shift to more cautious investing could offer more innovative products the chance to shine. Grogg shares what he sees as a necessary reset to new product innovation and which food categories are still ripe for disruption.
So thanks for joining me today, Jeff. I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit more about disruptive innovation and what's going on with companies. We've heard in the news over the last year or so, some larger companies like Chobani deciding to refocus on core brands and making like tweaks and refinements. You were quoted in the article as saying you don't believe the age of disruptive innovation is over. And I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about what got us to this point and why you believe disruptive innovation is still alive.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I do think, innovation does come in waves, and we've had certainly disruption to the disruptive flow a little bit here, partly because of funding and smaller companies are less well funded. And partly, in the larger companies, there's been a little pulling back and getting lean. But I think in some ways that enables disruptive innovation, that there's a lot less clutter on the shelves right now with brands that are taking up space that maybe you don't have the right to win, where maybe retailers and brands got a little overenthusiastic about startups that weren't really that differentiated and are not making it now. And then we're already seeing some larger companies and smaller, that are well-funded and well-positioned, take advantage of that space to move back and be a little more aggressive. I think back to, I've been around long enough to think back to like 2008, 2009, when we had similarly tough economic times, and there were some great brands grow out of that. Kind Bar, for example, came out of that kind of era where there's a little bit of clearing of the decks and it creates opportunities for new growth. So I'm optimistic that in the next couple of years, we'll actually see some more things. And even today, right now, Olipop and Puppy and so forth, that whole category has sprung up as a, disrupting soda. So we're already seeing signs of that happening in the market.
That's a great example, Poppy and Olipop. Are there any other categories that you're seeing already being disrupted or that you think should be disrupted?
Well, there's a lot that probably should be. That we could go for a long time on that. But, I think sauces right now, there's been a lot going on there, and making sauces more flavorful, more ethnically focused, more intense, moving beyond kind of a mainstream palette and fragmentation. And I don't mean just in the hot sauce category, but sauces, condiments in general has really exploded. And you're seeing, like with Gen Z and so forth, less cooking, so less need for spices, and more of, I can prepare something easy and then I can dress it up with condiments and sauces. So I think that's a space that's been, whether it's cooking sauces or post-cooking additions, there's been a lot going on there. I expect that to continue.
Another area that was mentioned in the article that was kind of seen as like ripe for disruption was around the baby boomers and seniors and their need for, or their desire for more interesting foods than maybe are available right now. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that restaurant trends do still tend to foreshadow what's going on in the CPG world. And, no matter where you are in America now, there's much more ethnic options. And so I think there's still the quality of what a lot of the ethnic options are in the grocery store is way behind what it probably ought to be. So I think, particularly in Asian cuisines, but even still Mexican, the stuff that's on offer is pretty dull. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And again, and we do a lot of this at CCD is, looking at what's happening in restaurant, you project a couple of years forward and you probably start to see it in CPG. So I think there's going to be more there that everybody's eating a broader palette. Everybody's expanded their flavor palette and is looking for, everything doesn't have to be dumbed down to the American palate as much. And there's a little more exploration that I think can be done in the frozen food set in particular, and probably other categories as well.
Yeah, I've seen some really interesting, but very authentic empanadas in the frozen food section like recently that have been very exciting. I personally enjoyed them, but so lots of things to look forward to.
I think just overall, there's room for that. There's room for, you can call it elevating, you can call it going to more authentic. It's probably a little bit of both. And also even hybridizing. You look at Walmart's new line they just, introduced, and one of those flavors that they're highlighting is like a chicken curry empanada thing that's some kind of mashup, but it's on target with how people are eating and accepting that there's really unique fusion of formats and flavors that can be put together.
I wanted to talk, you hit a little bit about this already, funding for new products and new innovative, disruptive ideas. And obviously VCs aren't throwing money around like they used to. What are they looking for when they are deciding to place their money?
I think two things come into play. And at the really early stage, they're not going to be profitable. Really, for the most part, if somebody's sub 5 million, sub 10 million, investors in that space are really looking for that, real confidence in a pathway to profitability, having good margins, really good velocities, and a disciplined approach to running the business. So it's a lot more about show me you can operate a functional business at this scale, and I'll trust that you can maybe operate at a little bigger scale, as opposed to just grow as fast as you can and, burn the cash and all of that. So, and then at the next level, investors, when they're at 10 to 20 million, they expect to see profitability. And they expect to have the optionality to take that money and put it into more growth, or to, go a little slower and be a little more self-sustaining. It used to be people were, the last few years, you could go 50, 80 million and not make any money, and nobody had a problem with that. And that's just not the investor mindset of the moment.
And are there any specific, obviously we could go to plant-based meat, plant-based products in general, but are there any categories that they're being especially maybe cautious around, or really looking for something disruptive before they invest in it, no matter what size? Or is it more about the business skills and making sure that they're growing appropriately if they're investing more money?
Yeah, I think investors, they don't want to be the fourth entry into the market. They don't want to be, me too. I think they want to see something they can believe in is got a right to win a little bit more. I think when there was so much money flowing in, there was the idea that you could have a financial arms race and that you didn't have to be first. You could just outfund the others. I'm still not a big believer in first to market. I think best to market is always the right answer, but it's maybe less about a financial arms race and more about running a better company than it was a few years ago. So, yeah, I think there's less interest in Me Too. There's less interest in funding something more than somebody else. And there's more interest in how well run is this business.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, it sounds to me like definitely disruptive innovation is not over. And it really sounds like it's kind of just like a pause. And I think you may have even said this in the article, but just kind of taking stock and deciding where is best to spend your money. It sounds like that's what's happening.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to be honest, you look at all the spending that happened, was that time period really that much more disruptive than when you've got less going on, but it's higher quality, more thoughtful innovation? I would argue that, when you look back at the curve over time, what we feel in the moment is a pause often still generates, some great brands and some actual market disruption. where in the heat of the height of investment and pandemonium and a very frothy market, a lot of times there's still a lot of noise, but maybe not that much outcome. So I'm pretty bullish that, for one, I think we're coming out of the worst of it, and into a little bit better phase where there's going to be a little bit more growth, a little more appetite. But more importantly, I think there's really good work being done now in an environment that's a little bit easier for the better companies to emerge.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for taking the time to talk to me today. This has been very enlightening, and I can't wait to try some of these new products.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Always happy to talk.
Jeff Grogg is the founder and managing director of JPG Resources, a team of more than 50 food business veterans who have conceived and commercialized thousands of food products. Grogg is also the founder and president of Snackworks of Michigan, a mid-scale contract manufacturer created to fill an underserved segment in food production. Read more about the new face of disruptive product innovation in the June issue of Food Technology. We'll be back with more Omnivore in a moment, but first, this word from our sponsor.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by Almond Board of California. Almonds offer endless possibilities for innovation. To help you stay ahead of the curve, Almond Board partnered with TasteWise, a generative AI platform for modern food and beverage brands, to identify shifts that will help shape the future of snacking and beyond. Get inspired and learn more by visiting almonds.com/trends. Again, that's visiting almonds.com/trends.
Welcome back to Omnivore. I'm Bill McDowell. All kelp is seaweed, but not all seaweed is kelp. And that matters a lot to our next guest. Matt Haight is the culinary and quality manager for Atlantic Sea Farms and an outspoken advocate for kelp's nutritional and sustainable properties. Atlantic Sea Farms currently leverages kelp to make veggie burgers and fermented salads, with frozen meals and snacks on tap to launch within the next year. Food Technology's Associate Editor Emily Little chatted with Haight about kelp as a food ingredient and its commercial potential.
Matt, thank you so much for meeting with me to talk about your work with kelp and Atlantic Sea Farms.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So tell me a bit about the nutritional benefits of kelp. Why do you think people should be starting to incorporate this into their diet?
So kelp is like an ocean superfood, right? So it's a one-stop shop for something that is rich in some essential minerals like iodine, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. It also has a great source of like vitamin A, C, E, B, and a couple different vitamin Bs as well, all in one spot.
I know a lot of consumers are looking for that, what you said, that one-stop shop. So it's really interesting that we have that ingredient already in our oceans.
Yeah, it is. Usually you can find some sort of ingredient that has a couple of them, but it's rare to find something that has all of them on one spot.
So in your work, most of your recipes use a fermentation process. Why do you think fermentation is the best method for this ingredient?
Yeah, so we do have a fermented line. So three of our products are fermented. And what makes it interesting is, it helps to add some more probiotics to a already high prebiotic product. So essentially the fermentation process is making it more digestible for you to take in those minerals and nutrients. And then, the addition of lactobacillus, different various strains of lactobacillus in the product is good for your overall gut biome.
Tell me a bit more about Atlantic Sea Farms' vertical integration and some of those promises that the company has behind sustainability.
Yeah, we are completely vertically integrated. We are a woman-run company and mission-driven. So we start all the way at the beginning. Our seaweed scientists will go out and go diving during the spawning season for the main kelp varietals in a couple of different spots and gathering wild, quote unquote, seed, and then bringing it back to our SQF certified facility and grow the seedlings, lack of a better term, into at our nursery. And then our supply team will begin to distribute those to our partner farmers, which are primarily lobstermen and mollusk farmers. We have 40 now up and down the main coast. And we give them to them for free, all the seed for free. And it starts growing season October. And we're actually right in the middle of harvest season right now. So the winter crops, it doesn't interfere with their busy season. So it's kind of giving them a diversified income stream and helping bring more jobs year round to Mainers. And so in doing so, we then harvest it all in about 6 weeks. This year, we're pulling in about 1 million pounds, and we guarantee to buy back 100% of everything that comes out of the water. It is based, it's graded once it comes out of the water, either food grade or not food grade, but all of it gets paid for and then turned into different products.
That's so great that what you mentioned, it grows during the off season. So you're not interfering with these farmers, but rather helping them.
Yeah, helping the farmers, and in doing so, they're helping themselves too by not doing any wild harvesting. We're putting in something that we're taking out. We're essentially just kind of making those waters. I don't want to say cleaner, but they, in a way, they kind of are. We're not taking anything away from the environment. We're just kind of doing an added benefit to the water, helping to de-acidify the ocean and ideally help keep the lobsters there.
Oh, we do know that Maine loves their lobsters.
Yeah, I think the rest of the world does too.
I'm certainly a fan. So what products does Atlantic Sea Farms currently offer for consumers?
Retail products, we have 3 ferments. So we have our fermented seaweed salad, a sichi, which is a seaweed kimchi, and then a spicy fermented gochujang seaweed salad. We also have 2 SKUs of sea veggie burgers. One flavor is a basil pesto, and the other is a sesame ginger. We have 3 SKUs of smoothie cubes. So those are essentially little pureed flavored kelp cubes that you can add to a smoothie. And then we also have our ready cut kelp, which is essentially just ready to eat blanched kelp. And we are in the process of trying to launch a new product, hopefully 2 products this year as well. Can't quite talk about those yet. And then we have ingredient partners. We have a powder and flake for sale for ingredient partners as well. And we just launched a couple of those on a smaller scale on the Amazon store.
That's great. What are the company's plans for the future? I know you said there are 2 products you can't talk about, but where are you hoping to be, let's say, in 10 years?
I think the goal for the company is to have 100 farmers in the water pulling 100,000 pounds apiece by 2030. I think is the goal.
Oh, wow.
So right now we're at 40, and they're not quite pulling that much, but they're getting there.
That's great. Matt, thank you so much for talking with me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good talking with you too.
Matt Haight is the Culinary and Quality Manager for Atlantic Sea Farms. You can read more about Matt's work to bring kelp to market in the June issue of Food Technology magazine. There are more than 3,500 types of traditionally fermented foods and beverages eaten around the world. Some of the oldest examples include bread, which first appeared 30,000 years ago, yogurt and cheese, which date back nearly 8,000 years, and chocolate, which is about 4,000 years old. While many of the fermentation processes of these products are industrialized today, it's easy to forget that natural fermentation in the field is still key to making coffee and chocolate, and these processes are not yet fully industrialized. Science and Technology editor Julie Larson-Brisher chatted with food scientist Cindy Stewart to better understand the benefits of traditional fermentation and gain insight into the untapped potential of fermentation and biotechnology for new product development and ingredient innovation.
Well, hi, Cindy. I'm looking forward to our conversation today on traditional fermentation processes and fermented foods.
Thanks so much, Julie. It's so super fun to be here with you today talking about fermentation and biotechnology.
Well, that's great. I found that same enthusiasm in your recent article for us here at Food Tech on the wonderful world of fermentation. And you talked a little bit about a new perspective on how fermentation is entwined with human history in that article. Can you talk to us a little bit about that insight?
Fermentation is really one of the oldest food processing methods. And it's been very widely used throughout human history in just about every culture around the globe. And as food scientists, of course, we learn about food fermentation during our undergrad or grad studies. And so you learn, I think you've learned just from growing up eating fermented foods, but then also it's really cool to study it and see how it actually works. And, it's yogurt, it's the cheese, beer, wine, kombucha, kimchi that we eat and enjoy every day. So really, it's a really exciting area. I think it's really interesting to think that fermentation was discovered by accident, I would imagine, because of someone who was very, very observant, thousands and thousands of years ago, which is exactly what scientists need to be as well, because sometimes your lab trials go a different way than you think, but if you're very observant, you might discover something like fermentation. But it was really, thinking about imagining the surprise of the person who used their cow stomach just as a container to take their milk with them. And then they went to get a drink of milk. And what did they have? A bunch of curds and whey in the stomach. So the precursor for cheese. And then over time, they started salting it as well. And cheese kind of evolved into what we know it today. So really interesting to just think about that history. And then I found a book called The Art of Fermentation by Katz, which is really a book mostly around how to do any kind of food or beverage fermentation you want to do at home. And he teaches you how to do it in a safe way, which is very important. But he had these chapters at the beginning talking about fermentation and in particular about the word culture and how culture is so multifaceted when you actually think about the meaning of the word. We have a starter culture that goes into fermented food. We all have a human culture around our art, our science, our music, different cultures throughout the world. And we have cultures living in our guts, on our skin as part of our microbiome. So it's really this beautiful intersection and tying of, biological nature with human systems. And really we've benefited from it globally from a health, a nutrition, and a social perspective. Just think of all the rituals and celebrations we have that include fermented foods like beer, wine, cheese, etc.
Well, when you say that, I will say, I know that fermentation has really captured the imaginations of the new generations. I have a nephew who, during the pandemic, of course, like everybody else, was making his own sourdough bread, right? And then he kind of graduated to craft beers, and then he moved on to kombucha. Oh man, that was a big one. And then just recently, he sent out a notice to anyone in the family who wanted ginger ale. He's on to ginger ale now. So I know it's a super trend, really, for a lot of people. But let's talk about, because the reason that people are more into fermentation, it seems recently, is because there's some benefits to it. So what are the benefits of traditional fermentation for producing food and beverage products?
Yeah, so I think there are so many benefits, just depending on what angle you want to look at from this, thousands of year old food processing method, right? So, as we already said, transforming a highly perishable raw material like milk into cheese or yogurt. And so you have a new product with new sensory experience, but most importantly, that cheese or yogurt format allowed the product to be safe for people to eat. And it extended the shelf life of the product compared to probably what was a day, if you're lucky, back then, to have milk stay fresh versus something like cheese that, could be stable for years. And if you think about, I think, early explorers who were on ships coming, across from Europe to the US, or soldiers, or, people building big buildings hundreds of years ago, a lot of time they were rationed beer because beer was safer to actually drink than the water they had available that they had to cart with them, let's say on the ship. So kind of interesting. I think there's many, many health benefits. Like people are very aware of this today. But, that lactobacilli that was naturally present in the milk and made the cheese is really the original probiotic. So we've been eating probiotics and postbiotics for a long time now, even before we realized that microorganisms even existed, right? Nobody really knew why this happened. They just knew it happened and they took advantage of it. And so we know there's lots of health benefits to eating fermented food. And one of them, of course, is eating the culture that's in the food, if it's a live culture, and, having that benefit also of postbiotics. So some of the metabolites that those microorganisms are also producing in your food gives a health benefit. And it can also make, as it's breaking down the original raw material, it can make some vitamins and other nutrients more available for the human gut to ingest and take up as part of our process. It's a very sustainable process. You just need the culture and the raw material. I mean, you can make it small scale at home and scale it all the way up to industrial production that we have today. And so it also becomes a really important method for food security and accessibility in parts of the world where they don't have refrigeration, for example, or have a lot of industrial processes in place. Using fermentation can provide food for those people that have a hard time accessing food. Of course, I think it's really delicious. And you have this, I think you said, with your nephew making it at home, a lot of restaurants have gotten into this because you can explore different fermented foods from different regions around the world. Maybe they're doing some fusion with it, but they can create such different and unique sensory experiences, the aroma, the textures, the flavors that you get from fermented food. So I think there's, lots of benefits from health and wellness to just enjoying and being social around food with people.
So what's the untapped potential of fermentation and biotech for new product development and ingredient innovation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Julie, and I could probably talk about it for hours. We've already talked a little bit about traditional fermentation, and maybe just one thing to add there is around using biomass fermentation to create mycelium from mushrooms, from fungus, which are used extensively in a lot of the plant-based alternative proteins, alternative meats that we have in the market today. So that's really kind of exciting as well. But really in the future, I think precision fermentation, for example, is really a great way of, first of all, improving a lot of the functionality of those starter cultures that can go into the traditional products, because it'll give different functionality and different sensory experiences in those final food and beverages. And of course, it's used today to make food enzymes, for example. So lactase that is used to make milk lactose-free for those of us who are lactose intolerant. But the food industry, there's almost no limit to what I think that it can do in precision fermentation, producing all kinds of alternative proteins that then don't have to be sourced from animals, producing flavors and colors, fats and oils. Our imagination is the limit here. So I think it's exciting that we can improve health and wellness of people, animals, and the environment because it is a very sustainable process as well. And then I'd like to just mention cultivated meat, seafood, and other ingredients. I mean, this is not a microbial fermentation, so it's a little to the side, maybe a sister, because it's actually utilizing cell tissue culture. In a similar way, you're using a bioreactor in a fermentation tank, but essentially you're using cells that have been biopsied from a live animal, doesn't hurt the animal, and then those cells are replicated in that bioreactor kind of in a similar way so that it can produce alternative meats or seafoods or oils that are exactly the same in composition as the animal the animal meat would be, which I think is really exciting because it, is a very, again, looking at sustainability, feeding a large population, having different ways of producing food, having accessibility and affordability as the demand for protein and the demand goes up as population rises. So I'm so excited about where precision fermentation and cultivated meats and seafood can take us. And I think it's a really exciting future.
Well, I'm going to pass this along to my nephew, and maybe he'll start making me some cultivated bacon or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
That would be great.
But thank you so much for giving us the scoop on fermentation today, Cindy. And it's always been a pleasure, as always.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. It was a great fun, and have a great rest of your day.
Cindy Stewart is a fellow and former president of IFT and the founder of Innovative Food Consulting. You can find her article, The Wonderful World of Fermentation, in the June issue of Food Technology.
Thank you to this episode's sponsor, Almond Board of California. Get inspired and learn more by visiting almonds.com/trends.
And that wraps up this episode of Omnivore. Thanks again to all our guests and my colleagues at Food Technology. Omnivore is produced and distributed by the Institute of Food Technologists. If you enjoyed today's show and want to learn more about Food Technology Magazine or how to join the conversation by becoming an IFT member, visit ift.org/membership. For more in-depth discussion about innovation in the science of food, check out IFT's other podcast, Side Dish, on the News and Publications page of ift.org. If you have comments or suggestions for future shows, just send us an email. The address is editors@ift.org. For the entire team at Food Technology and IFT, I'm Bill McDowell. Thanks for listening, and join us again for our next episode. This is Omnivore.